This meeting is called to order. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Barfield,
I'm right here.
Okay.
Commissioner Merritt,
Present.
Commissioner Vibisier,
Present.
Commissioner Minor,
Here.
Commissioner Dozier, Commissioner Maddox,
Presente.
Commissioner Matlow,
Here.
Commissioner Williams-Cox,
Here.
and Commissioner Richardson. Thank you.
We do.
Any agenda modification?
No, sir, not at this time.
Okay. Yes, sir.
With the change in voting weight, this is one, that the quorum is constituted by number of folks here, it's not by weight anymore.
No, sir, we haven't officially finished all of the documentation and paperwork, so we're still under the weighted voting at this point.
How long before we finish that?
Hopefully in the next few months, just getting it through all the other local governments.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, yes. Again.
How long ago did we make that vote?
Last year, I realized a few weeks ago that we put everything together, and I never sent it out to the local governments to have that adopted, so that's something we're working on now.
I'd like to see us get that done.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any citizens' comments? Do we have any?
We did not have any cards submitted.
Okay. Do we entertain a motion for adoption of consent agenda?
So moved. Second.
There is a motion and a second to approve consent agenda. All in favor show by the sign of vote aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Ayes have it. So there's no item pulled for discussion, okay? CRO-TPA action.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. The first item up is the consultant selection for our regional mobility plan update. And Mr. Castrua is going to review with you the process we went through for the consultant selection, and we're requesting action on this item.
We missed the safety.
That was part of the
Safety minutes update. That's part of the consent.
Good afternoon, Commissioners.
Good afternoon.
Every 5 years, we go through the process of updating our long-range transportation plan. The last one was adopted in 2015, and so we've been going through the process of developing the scope of services, and we had that completed in November, and we released the request for proposals in December, and we received 2 proposals at the beginning of January. We've pulled together a selection committee of 5 people, and representing Star Metro, the CRTPA, Commissioner Dozier was also involved with that as well. We shortlisted, well, we didn't really need to shortlist because there were only 2 proposals. We went through the process of evaluating the proposals and had presentations February 8th. And of those scores in the agenda item, you can see that Kimley Horn came out with 130.65, or I'm sorry, 188.25, and Future Plan Consulting came out at 166.25. So our recommendation is to approve, sorry, as well as the RPC was on the selection committee. Sorry, Chris.
No worries. He's not here.
Was to approve Kimley Horn as the consultant for the long-range transportation plan, as well as provide the executive director negotiations for the contract, and as well as administering the contract, and have the chairperson, Commissioner via BCA, sign the contract when we go through that process.
I'll move options 1 and 2.
Second.
There is a motion and a second, and Commissioner Maddox recognized.
Thank you, sir. I have a quick and simple question. Do we contemplate MWBE percentages within our contract, our professional contract?
No, sir, if you recall, because we get federal funds, we're not allowed to do that as part of the grading criteria. Same with geographic location.
Even though we're not allowed to do it, I do remember us having that conversation, I think. Even though we're not allowed to do it, are we at that point not allowed to ask if the consultant will consider?
No, sir, it cannot be part of the scoring criteria that we go through.
At all.
Again, I understand that My question is not that we put it as a part of
Did
the
we?
scoring criteria. My question is, are we not allowed to ask if the consultant or if the applicant would consider, or if they have used MWBEs in the past?
Let me answer the back half of that question first. We have had consultants who have used MBEs and DBEs, but I still don't think we are allowed to basically ask them to do that. I can double check that to make sure, but I'm fairly certain we can't put any kind of pressure, I guess I would say, for lack of a better word, for them to hire certain sub-consultants, whether they be MBE, DBE, or whichever.
Am I not asking my question? I'm not saying that we ask them to do it. What
Right.
I'm asking is, during the process, we're not allowed to ask the question of if they have
If they
used it
do.
in the past. I'm not saying that we put any pressure, say they have to do anything.
Sure, okay.
It's just knowing whether or not they have used them in the past, and if that's something that they have done in the past. I mean, and I guess as it concerns this vote we're taking today, it really holds no consequence to it, because obviously the question was not asked. But I do believe that in the validity of the program, even though we cannot force or even require.
Yeah. And like I said, I don't
it to
like using
happen.
that
I mean,
word,
just
but-
asking the question, say, hey, have you done it in the past? I don't think that's a bad thing. But maybe we're skirting the line by doing it, but it's a question I would have had, I would have liked to know.
Okay. I mean, we can look through that and see if it's a question we asked, but I know most all the ones we worked with in the past have used some type of MBE or DBE in some capacity.
Thank you.
Commissioner Barfield.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Castrella, I'm not concerned, but I'm surprised that only 2 people responded to that RFP. And sometimes in our county, when we have such a low response rate, we re-advertise for that. Not that we're dissatisfied with what we have and the service that we're getting, but 2 is awfully low for the type of work that we do here. And I would think that organizations would be interested, more organizations would be interested in partnering with us. Any thoughts on that?
Sure, I have lots of thoughts on that, but
You got 5 minutes.
typically what you do is it's not just a single consultant, it's a consulting team. So you have 4 or 5 consultants on a team as compared to a single consultant preparing that. So in effect, we have more than one consultant will be working for us, but it will be under one project team that comes forward. So it's always a concern, and it seems to be in the last couple cycles that we've had with this. We've gone from 8, about 2 cycles ago or 3 cycles ago to 4, and then they just keep dwindling down, and it just may be a result of consulting firms being bought up by other firms. I don't know. There's no way to know. But they are teams made up of consultants that have done work for us before.
Interesting.
Okay. Yeah. Commissioner Diane William Cox.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Going back to the question that Commissioner I'm getting tongue-tied between Matlow and Maddox. Maddox, you're in my brain.
I didn't say anything.
Going back to what Commissioner Maddox was, I guess, the subject he was touching upon, I understand in the process of selecting that we cannot force and probably shouldn't even ask the question. But once awarded at a conference to talk about the project and the project plan, could it not then be discussed that what we're trying to do here is to make sure that we have some economic development that also reaches the minority population, minority small business or women population, to not asking them to do anything, but just letting them know the spirit of what we're trying to do here in hopes that they would consider helping us in that arena to promote economic development once it's awarded.
And I think what we can do too, kind of better understand.
Much better than yours.
The question is at least to identify their subs that happen to be MBEs and DBEs. So, and I apologize if I didn't. I don't think I was quite understanding your question the first time. But again, I think that would be the easiest thing to do, at least identify those subs that are MBEs or DBEs.
Yeah. Thank you.
And then it's our desire to, we want diversity.
Right.
So just a little bit more information about that. Within the RFP, we encourage the consultants to provide, to look at the the DOT has a website that lists all the MBEs and DBEs, and we encourage them to go to that site to find DBEs if they don't have any. Typically, there are some on the team, on the team that's made up. The DOT does have an aspirational goal of 9.91% for these kind of MBE and DBE activities. So with every one of these contracts, I've never had one that hasn't had one come in with a DBE or an MBE on there, but we can't require them to do that. But we do have that within the request for proposals to include that in the opportunity.
That was my question. Thank you so much, Commissioner Williams-Cox, for adding that piece, because that's all I'm concerned about. And honestly, I would also, if I could, like to see the percentage breakdowns when we get these kind of contracts, just for my own information. I understand that the committee goes through it and makes the decisions and makes the recommendations back to us, but just for me to be able to see it, I like to see it. And in all actuality, I would like to also actually see the DBEs that are doing work within our county. It's my belief that one day those MWBEs should be able to work themselves to be primary. And I would like to see who's doing the work in the town and see if we're spreading them around and see if we can ever get some to the point that they are applying as primary contractors instead of our MWBE program. So that's, if we could start including that in the agenda item.
Yeah, that would be a problem at all. Thank you.
Okay.
Chair.
Yes.
Not to be the dead horse, but I understand you're saying that the DOT has a website and they do include them, but we know that traditionally what has happened is once awarded, change orders are submitted, and sometimes those people find their way out. So I would hope that we will pay attention to change orders and make sure that those who got ushered in to be a part of the packet remains with the packet unless there's some good reason that they shouldn't be.
Absolutely. So just to answer that question real quick, within our contract, if there is a change within the consulting team, we have to be notified and approve that change.
Okay. Next item is. We took a vote. It's an action item.
Yes.
Yes, and okay, there is a motion for option 1 and 2, and second.
There was a second.
Okay. Ms. Mitchell, does she call? Just a voice vote. Okay. All in favor, show by the sign of vote aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Next item, the Executive Director's contract update.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Item 6B relates to some of the issues that were discovered during the audit that we finished up last November. One of those related to the car allowance with my contract. Per federal requirements, I'm required to, if I get a car allowance, provide a monthly mileage report. Through the discussion at that meeting and then with the executive committee earlier this month, my recommendation, and it was decided to basically eliminate the car allowance and transfer the rate that I receive annually for a car allowance and make that part of my base salary.
Motion to approve.
Second.
There is a motion to approve and a second. All in favor, show by the sign. Oh,
You had a question?
question?
No, it's cool. I just want to make a comment that at our most recent MPOAC meeting, this isn't something that's unique to us. I think it was brought up during that meeting that all executive directors across the state are having to do a similar thing because they've all realized the same thing at the same time. So what we're doing today is actually bend the model for the executive directors across the state.
Thank you, Commissioner Maddox. Any other? Well, those in favor of the motion to approve, show by the sign of vote aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. The next item will be item 6C, Pensacola Street and Thorpe Street Traffic and Operation Analysis.
Mr. Chairman, this is the finalization of these two particular corridor assessments that we did, Pensacola and Thorpe. As you recall, about a year or so ago, we identified 4 corridors to do what we were calling an assessment, which is basically looking at kind of the existing conditions and then some limited improvements in terms of traffic operations or future needs for those corridors. We kicked off Bannerman Road about a month and a half ago, and we'll be kicking off South Adams here probably in the next few weeks. So with that, there she is. Beverly Davis from RS&H is here to provide you an overview of the Pensacola and Tharp Street assessments.
Well, good afternoon, y'all.
Good afternoon.
As Greg was saying, that we had identified 4 corridors for analysis. That includes Tharp Street, Pensacola Street, Appleyard to Capitol Circle, and Tharp, Ocala to Capitol Circle, Bannerman Road, as well as South Adams Street. And we're looking at these corridors for operational improvements rather than trying to see whether major capacity enhancements can be put off a little bit. So the project status is that Tharp and Pensacola, we're presenting to you today. Bannerman is underway, and South Adams Street, we're waiting to coordinate fully with the FAMU campus master plan that's underway. So Tharp Street is included in the current regional mobility plan for widening from 2 to 4 lanes, and again, that's from Ocala to Capitol Circle at a cost of a little over $51 million, and it is also identified as a blueprint project. We did look at the existing conditions and then identified specific sections based on the land use, associated land use and character along Tharp Street. All of the corridor is 2 lanes with the width of 12 foot, and the right-of-way varies from 66 feet to 123 feet along the corridor.
Let me ask real quick, what is the distance of this study, mileage?
Mileage, 4 miles maybe? Somewhere in that range. Yeah, 4, maybe a little 4+ miles. So here it is on the map, and it's showing the sections that were delineated based on the adjacent land use and the character of the roadway. The next step was to identify the issues that we found within the operation of the roadway. The first was transit accessibility. As you can see, the stops are not ADA compliant, but I will say that compliance with the ADA regulations is only required where sidewalks and shelters are present, but it is a focus of Star Metro to make sure or to try to have all stops meet those ADA requirements. And you can see the desire paths for folks accessing the transit stop. Also, spot congestion along the roadway, particularly in the residential sections and the PM peak. This is primarily due to transit vehicles stopping, trash pickups, people making left turns where the traffic backs up, and really not having room to get around the traffic that has stopped. Also, the lack of bicycle and pedestrian facilities. You saw the desire path going to the transit stop, and you can see the frequency of the pedestrian and the bicycle traffic along this roadway. 90% of the parcels have no access to a sidewalk or a bicycle facility, and again, the desire paths are prevalent.
That's a very nice term, desire path.
Well, it's better than goat path.
That's what it said in the agenda item, goat path.
Goat path.
Yeah.
I like desire better.
Yeah, I kind of like it a little bit better. Also, the lack of bicycle and pedestrian facilities where there are other constraints. For instance, the culvert with the guardrail that's just east of Trimble Road, where the cyclists and the pedestrians actually have to walk in the roadway. And also flooding and runoff. You can see some of the erosion that is occurring throughout the corridor, and also the lack of stormwater treatment other than the water sitting in the grass ditch. So the next step in the analysis was to look at the traffic level of service. The intersection at Tharp and Mission Road, it operates at level of service E and the PM peak, and all of the other intersections within that corridor operate at an acceptable level both in the AM and the PM peak. From a safety perspective, we utilized the data that we had collected for the recent congestion management plan update. There were over 700 total crashes in that section. Over 300 were injury crashes with 1 fatal crash. And the rear-end collisions are the most common with 50% of those crashes, and that, again, is likely due to that spot congestion with the vehicles backing up.
And texting.
Pardon me?
And texting.
Yep. Yeah, distracted driving is always an issue. Looking at the crash rate along Tharp Street is higher than the state average for similar facilities. So the recommendations we've divided into the different character sections. For that industrial section east of Capitol Circle to Mission Road, the addition of sidewalk, excuse me, with a 4-foot utility strip, addition of shared lane markings or sharrows where that's appropriate with the speed limits, reconfiguring the Bluntstown Highway and Tharp intersection to a T intersection. Right now it's got the slide intersection.
Who would tee into who?
Bluntstown would tee into Tharp, and I'll show you a drawing of that on the next slide. And then adding sidewalks with curb and gutter along Bluntstown Highway. And this is the drawing. You can see Bluntstown Highway teeing into Tharp Street, and access to the property would occur off of Bluntstown Highway.
So it go down that back road behind that store?
Yes, sir.
There'd be a reline there?
Right.
What about the old section there?
The old section is where we were talking about adding the sidewalks. In the residential section from Mission Road to Falcon Crest, again, adding the sidewalk with curb and gutter, adding a pedestrian bridge across that culvert at the main central drainage ditch right there at Trumbull Road, near Trumbull Road. From Mission Road to Trumbull Road, widening 10 feet along the south side of the facility and installing medians with turn lanes. Mission Road to west of Gloria, the addition of 2 U-turn areas, and I'll show you some drawings of that. Yes, sir.
Just out of curiosity, wouldn't it be a lot cheaper to extend a box culvert than it would be to build a pedestrian bridge? I mean, you could add 10 feet to the roadway with a box culvert pretty easy versus a bridge.
Yeah, I know that when we looked at the cost benefit, that the addition of the pedestrian bridge was
If it's truly a box culvert,
beneficial.
if it's a bridge, that's different, but
Yeah,
if it's a
and
box culvert,
I'd have to check on that. I'm not totally sure.
that's the engineer coming out.
Yeah.
Save us a million.
Yeah. Also, the addition of turnout bays for the transit vehicles. I know that's not ideal for a transit vehicle because a lot of times they have trouble accessing, getting back into the travel lanes. However, we do feel that will improve the operations and address that spot congestion. And then Ocala Road to include a bike lane near Ocala Road. So this is the Mission Road at Tharp Street intersection, kind of a modified Michigan U-turn as one alternative to allow access for the westbound drivers to get to the south side properties. And then moving along with the addition of the medians and the turn lanes as well as the sidewalk area.
Are those going to be landscaped, those areas? Middle,
These, I believe, are curb and gutter.
Curb and gutter?
Yeah, with
Nothing in the
the
median?
earth median that could have some landscaping in it.
Just curious, not asking.
And one of the things that we were trying to do was minimize the impact because a lot of the homeowners and businesses and that type of thing along the roadway, or some of them are very, very close to the roadway.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, that's what I was going to ask because my daughters attended New Beginnings daycare,
Right.
And so when we were discussing this as a blueprint project,
Right.
that of course came to mind for me because a lot of those businesses, and I was going to ask, is this going to necessitate any condemnation or purchasing of, because they are right up on
They are.
Tharp.
And it would be the area for the sidewalk, which would be a 5-foot sidewalk. So what we've recommended should fit within the existing right-of-way. There may be some small amount of right-of-way acquisition on the south side to be able to put in the medians, but that's why we're recommending it only on the south side. The properties are set back a little bit.
Okay. Thank you,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Richardson, if you recall, that was kind of the discussion we had initially when we started these assessments. If you look in our last RMP as well as the blueprint project, it actually calls for the 4-laning of Tharp Street all the way through. When you look at the amount of development out there, the area by and large is pretty much built out. You look at the traffic counts over the past, they haven't grown that much. So that was part of what we looked at here was, can you come in and work something less than a 4-lane? Because if you do 4-lane that, yeah, you're talking
It would-
significant
yeah.
right-of-way impact,
Yes.
either on one side or the other, and potentially both sides. So that was
Right.
really, I think, the primary reason we were looking at this is to see if you could get away with something less than a 4-lane
I
facility.
guess that kind of,
Okay.
I was going to ask that same question. This whole presentation, is this what's going to be done, or is this saying either 4-lane it or do this, or what?
Ultimately, when we first started out with these, our original plan was to do these assessments, kind of get the lay of the land, move them into a corridor study after that. However, on the blueprint side, this project was not included in their $100 million bond that they're talking about. So from the blueprint standpoint, it's a lower priority. We were also thinking of it in terms of possibly using federal funds on it, but the funding picture we're seeing out of DOT, those funds are few and far between. So I think what we would do with this is come back and maybe look at potentially some of these spot improvements like the intersections. I don't know that we'd be able to do anything with sidewalks and things like that at this point. So by and large, I think a lot of this is in essence going to be backburnered for a while.
And it's not a state road?
No, so this is a county road? County road, yes, sir. So ultimately, if it is to be 4-lane, that would probably be a decision with the county and/or blueprint.
The other, Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
Thank you.
Commissioner Matt.
The other question that I had, the segment from Ocala West, where the hill goes, what would be done there? Because that is really tight.
It is, and I believe we have some sidewalks that are recommended there, and I think that's where we are. That's the pedestrian bridge. And then this is moving on down towards Ocala with the sidewalks, and then having a bike lane stripe towards Ocala.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely needed. I mean, my daughters were there almost 15 years ago, and I just can remember the traffic and getting behind those buses, and, I mean, it was a problem even then. I can imagine it's maybe
I used to
worse.
live on Trimble Road, too.
Yeah,
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
in that section of the highway that Commissioner Richardson was mentioning, we lost a family friend on that hill.
oh, yeah.
Because when you come over the hill, you can't see that cars have stopped.
Right.
And his car flipped over into that ditch and shifted.
Right.
You know, the passenger survived, but the driver did not. So every time I come through that section, it's a very emotional thing. So I would love to see it look different.
Yes.
Because I think the marker has even been removed from that spot from where he was killed. But
Okay.
let's do what we can to make it look better.
Yes, ma'am. And then in the Sheridan Road section, the addition of the sidewalk again with the curb and gutter. And that's the drawing of it between Ivan and Deborah. And so the summary of the recommendations is to add the sidewalks and the curb and gutter, sharrows where appropriate, along with the bike lanes, addition of that pedestrian bridge over the drainage ditch, reconfiguring the Bluntstown and the Tharp Street intersection, and the addition of the median between Mission and Trimble with the potential configuration of U-turn access points to allow traffic to access properties on the other side.
Mr. Chairman,
yes,
the reconfiguration of Bluntstown and Tharp would be relatively easy, wouldn't it? Because the right-of-way's already there and the road's already there.
Yes, sir.
Would there be a stoplight added there?
I think we'd have to look at the traffic to determine whether.
Most traffic
it's warranted or
heading
not.
west goes around Bluntstown Highway down to
Right.
Tennessee Street.
Yeah. So with Pensacola Street, again, it's included in the regional mobility plan, widening from 2 to 4 lanes, and the extents are from Capitol Circle to Appleyard, cost of almost $30 million, and this is also a blueprint project.
State road or county road?
This is a state road. The issues that we identified, we went through the same process as we did with Tharp Street, looking at spot congestion, and that spot congestion occurs primarily with the access points into and out of TCC. In the analysis, traffic really spikes for the cars that are entering and exiting, particularly with class changes and things like that. And a lot of the motorists we notice in our field review are ignoring traffic restrictions, as in no left turn, making either illegal left turns or making right turns and going down and making unauthorized U-turns on private property. We also found a traffic bottleneck where the lane transitions from Capitol Circle from the 4 lanes, or from 6 lanes, excuse me, it goes to 2 lanes over the bridge, over the railroad, and then it continues as a 2-lane facility and then transitions back to 4 lanes near TCC.
And you know what people do when that transition starts? People breakneck, try to get ahead of
Try to
it.
get ahead.
Yeah.
Also, again, similar to Tharp, the lack of bicycle and pedestrian facilities, the grass and the shoulder ditch for the pedestrians or the cyclists is not always present, and the bridge also has no facilities on that. In looking at the traffic level of service, Capitol Circle at Blountstown Highway operates at level of service D in both of the peak times, as well as Pensacola at Appleyard. All the other intersections in that corridor are operating at acceptable levels. The highest volumes do occur between Blountstown and Capitol Circle with an AADT of a little over 18,000. We undertook the same safety analysis. There were about 160 crashes in this section. The highest occurs at Pensacola and Appleyard due, again, to those TCC access points. The congestion, the average, we accessed information from the National Performance Data Management Research Set, NPM-RDS, and that provides real-time big data where your cell phone is pinging to the towers, and then they capture that anonymously to determine things like traffic flow and speed. The average peak hour travel time between Appleyard and Blountstown Highway is 20 miles an hour. However, within the data set, that occurs at White Drive, I believe, that's east of Appleyard, that segment, all the way past the railroad bridge. So I think the intersection is impacting that travel speed as well as the bottleneck. So the recommendations for Pensacola to address the bottleneck, that's widen the bridge and the remaining 2-lane section of Pensacola to 4 lanes, as well as including bicycle and pedestrian facilities on that corridor. Addressing the spot congestion through improved signage to try to help deter motorists from making those unauthorized U-turns. And then the potential to reconfigure the TCC access points with dedicated entrance and exit, moving that further from the intersection. So the recommendation is working with the property owners where the majority of the unauthorized U-turns are occurring and posting private drive, no U-turn. And then working with TCC to have a dedicated entrance closest to the intersection, and then moving the exit of TCC further away from the intersection to help get some of that congestion away from that from the intersection and just reconfiguring that access. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
That railroad track, that's not just one track, is it? Isn't it like 2 or 3 tracks next to each other there?
I believe it's 2. Yep, it's 2. You can see where they split.
That's the most expensive part, I'm assuming, is that bridge.
Right, oh yeah, and working with the railroad.
Mr. Chair, move option 1.
Second.
There is a motion to adopt option 1 and a second. Question? All in favor, show by the sign of vote aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
report.
Item number 8, executive directors. What is that? Oh, DOT. I'm trying to skip DOT. Oh, DOT. We cannot do that to our friends.
You might want to after the update. Huh? You never know.
Oh, boy.
No, the department just has one item to update this board on today. It's the upcoming PD&E studies we've got planned for the interstate. Basically, we're looking to do a PD&E re-eval from US 90 at Midway, moving east to the existing 6-lane section, and then picking up on the eastern side where the 6-lane ends, moving to just east of Mahan. We're anticipating the kickoff meeting in early summer of this year, and as this gets a little more near term, we'll provide an update to the CRTPA.
Okay. Yes, sir, Commissioner Richardson.
Name, so that's right.
I know who you are, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The question that I have is a follow-up. I brought up, I think maybe at the last meeting, the inquiring about the possibility of a crosswalk from Liberty Park to the transit stop there on Orange Avenue, just west of the intersection of Spring Hill and where Spring Hill and Lake Bradford meet. Just east of that, or west of that intersection, is a neighborhood called Liberty Park, and the people have to cross Orange Avenue, or the residents, to get to the transit bus stop on the north side of Orange Avenue. And it is really dangerous because there's a lot of traffic that comes through there. And so I was just wondering where we are with that.
Okay, I'll have to follow up and find out where that request landed. I'm not sure. This is the first I've heard of that request. There is no crosswalk or anything there?
No, nothing right now. And so, you know, people are left to their own devices to get across the street, even from either to the transit bus stop or the service station right across the street where people go to make purchases.
Okay.
There are no sidewalks there either.
No, oh yeah, yeah. Believe me, that is a recipe for disaster if something isn't. I mean, there is nothing that protects, and the kids walk from NIMS to Liberty Park, and at one point there is a rail. So if somebody's distracted and they just slightly go over into that bike path, pedestrian doesn't stand a chance. But I mean, it's been like that for a long time. I brought it to the attention of this board at least once, maybe more than once. It's a state road, but I tell you, I come through there and I just cringe when I see those kids walking along that bike path, and there is nothing to protect them from traffic at all. We've got to do something about that at some point when we look at, especially when we look at widening Orange Avenue. And that's the other question that I had, Mr. Chairman, if I might, at this point, is where are we? I know we're in the process of doing the PD&E study.
Yes, sir. We're wrapping up our portion of it on Orange Avenue. The department is going through the feasibility portion of theirs now.
Okay.
And then they'll be moving on to the full PD&E probably the latter part of this year. And if you recall, I think the last time when we talked about the Southwest Area Plan, we talked about this particular segment because when we went and met with the folks in Liberty Park, that was a big topic for them. Yeah. And this is one of the projects that we talked about possibly separating out as an individual project because, as we've talked about before, as it stands now, you know, unless something changes, 4-laning of Orange Avenue is probably at least 10 to 12 years out. So in the meantime, we wanted to look at some of the projects like the sidewalks, the connection back over to Spring Hill Road with more interim projects that we can try to establish some of those connections, but then at the same time, make sure we can do it in a way that it doesn't get torn out, you know, when Orange Avenue does get done. Because, again, the overall improvements to Orange Avenue are still several years out, and there's definitely some immediate needs.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting that you say 10 to 12 years out because 10 to 12 years ago, we were told that.
Really?
It was going to be 10 to 12 years out. So it keeps getting pushed out.
Groundhog Day.
Greg, and I tell you, something has to happen. Orange Avenue, that traffic backs up so far when if that traffic, if the light turns red at Pasco and Orange Avenue, traffic backs up all the way to Lake Bradford Road, right there in front of NIM.
Sure.
I'm serious. It's unbelievable. And then on FSU game days, they reroute traffic to Orange Avenue. So if you live off of Orange Avenue, it's almost impossible to get in and out. And I tell you, one of the things that I talked to Wayne about was you know, getting a legislative appropriation to advance fund Orange Avenue because something has got to happen. I just can't see another 10 or 12 years waiting for that. Like I said, there were people, I mean, you know, the city even purchased property along Orange Avenue when I first moved in there. That was 22 years ago. And they said, well, you know, we know that this is going to be 4-laned at some point, so the city actually bought that property, Diane. It's on the, Commissioner Williams-Cox, I'm sorry, that's on the north side of Orange Avenue, right there by College Terrace. They bought that property for the purpose of 4-laning Orange Avenue 22 years ago.
Well, that's interesting to hear because when, you know, from my understanding, really none of the work's been done to move the project along. As you all know, the PD&E is kind of that first step.
Right.
So it's interesting if you were hearing that 10 or 12 years ago that it was going to get 4-laned. I'd be curious to know where that was coming from because, again, you know, we're sitting here today just knowing how the DOT process works. Again, and the funding, that's the biggest issue.
Yeah.
Is we're still, unless a bunch of money starts falling from the sky, we're 10, 12
Well,
years out.
there are people who attend the same church that I do. My pastor called me about it just the other day. We have been hearing about that for years. Shirley Gooding Butler owns the not where the cosmetology school is, but right next door. She and her late husband owns that property. And like I said, they were told years ago that FDOT was going to purchase that property for the widening of Orange Avenue on the north side.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And it's just never moved forward, and now the traffic situation has gotten worse.
And again, you know, I believe we had these conversations last time. That's what we want to do for like Spring Hill and Orange Avenue. Are there intersection improvements we can do now that will alleviate some of that in anticipation that one day, hopefully, the road's going to get 4-lane? But I think
now what Wayne told me is that, you know, in order to even request a legislative appropriation, we would have to have the PD&E study.
Right, you still
we
got to
can
go
go
through
to the
design and
design.
things like
Yeah.
that. Yeah, there's quite a ways to go just in terms of phases before that road's even done.
Right.
But the biggest issue is going to be the right-of-way and the construction because you're probably talking, you're probably talking $10 to $15 million a mile for right-of-way and construction. So that's a lot of money, especially in the climate we're in right now.
Yeah.
So, but I think that's what we've talked about is looking at are there spot improvements that we can make along that corridor in anticipation.
Yeah. If nothing else, right there at Liberty Park. Like I said, I just pray that nothing ever happens to those people walking along there. Especially, you know, anybody, but especially those children that walk from NIMS.
And I think you'll see that one in particular come out as a recommendation of the Southwest Area Plan, as well as crossings down at NIMS, because that was another issue that we heard in a lot of the community meetings as well.
Yeah. Those kids, they cross. There's a crossing guard at the light, but they still cross wherever they want to. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, thank you, Commissioner Richardson. Yes, Commissioner Barfield.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to address Mr. Polk also. I sent an email to Carrie Harrell about 19. Their DOT is resurfacing 19 South, right at the city limits going south, and thank you very much for that. We appreciate it. But as you're going north from that project, we have some gullies on 19 from the asphalt going down like this, and some areas are deep like this. And then when you go past the courthouse in Monticello, it's occurring again right in Monticello. And I don't know if it needs resurfacing or if you need to bring your Band-Aid crew out and put a Band-Aid over that, whatever the case may be. If you will take a look at that, it's deep in the asphalt where the tires are going. So if you take a look at that, I would appreciate it.
Okay, we'll send our maintenance folks out there and see what we can do.
Okay, thank you. And you're more than welcome to call me, and I'll be happy to take them on a bicycle and show it to them.
Okay.
Okay, I think I also have something to question for Mr. Polk. And State Road 267 North in Gaston County from King Street down to the Georgia line, that's a state road. Is that a road that we the state road projects do not go through CIGP, SCRAP, and SCARP? The state road is a CROTPA project, right?
Depending on the program you're looking for, if you're looking for a capacity type improvement or a traffic ops type improvement, they come through this organization.
Okay.
If it's just a resurfacing project, that goes through the district office for program.
Okay, this is resurfacing and shoulders added. That's what we'll need on that road. You need resurfacing, and when these people, whenever vehicles are coming in both directions, anyone who is walking have to step off and step into the grass. And we would like to at least add shoulder to the resurfacing so that at least people can step into the shoulder and as opposed to going into the grass. And some part of the road does do have a ravine, which could cause someone to actually fall off the road. So if we can look at that, this is County Road 267 North.
County road or state road?
No, State Road. State Road 267 North. That is from King down to the Georgia line.
Yeah, each year we go out and do an analysis of pavement condition, so I can inquire as to what is the current condition of that road and try to anticipate as to when it will be added to the.
That would be truly appreciated. The most important thing, the most important part of it is the pedestrian safety with regards to having some shoulder to walk on as opposed to stepping off the road onto the grass. Okay, thank you very much, sir. And yes, Commissioner William.
Mr. Chair, I want to speak to Greg on the issue regarding the widening of Orange Avenue and doing some type of temporary relief. A citizen sent me something about rumble strips because there were concerns, you know what I'm talking about? Mm-hmm. There were some concerns about around the schools, children, getting into the crosswalk perhaps, and, letting drivers know that they're approaching pedestrian type areas. She sent me some pictures of signs that are used somewhere in Texas and showed the rumble strips on the street as a temporary solution until, time passes and Orange Avenue or whatever widens. Could we look at some potential temporary solutions like that to at least alert drivers that they're approaching a heavy pedestrian area, children in the area, something along those lines. I know Tennessee Street, I think it is, they used to have flashing lights with pedestrians, letting the pedestrians be in the walkway.
Yes, ma'am.
Something along those lines, because drivers are distracted. I'm a driver, sometimes I'm distracted. Sure. But if you got some things to let you know, hey, stay woke, wake up and stay woke. You're approaching a dangerous area, perhaps that could provide some relief until such time that we can do something more permanent.
Sure, and I think that's a good idea. Specifically to the rumble strips, I'm not sure different states treat those differently, but I think that was kind of our idea is some type of, again, what I would term, when I say short term in that respect, it's not, it would be something like we put it on South Adams potentially. There's a crossing signal there, or like you said, the flashing lights or something like that. But yeah, I think that's our intent, is to try to develop some type of projects like that we can move forward sooner than later.
Okay. Executive Director's report.
Mr. Chairman, I just had a couple of brief things. The Executive Committee met a couple of weeks ago, and if you recall, there were some conversations back at our December meeting related to the audit about potentially restructuring the Executive Committee, making some changes to it. The committee talked through several different options, but basically decided to leave it the way it is. One of the things we talked about is we would bring the annual audit to the Executive Committee for review every year before it comes to the board. That way they're at least briefed on that. But in terms of any other structural changes, the committee decided to just basically leave it the way it was.
Good idea.
And
what's that? What will we do in the interim? I don't believe this year the structure is what we've had in the past. Well, as far as county representation.
We talked a little bit about that, but I
didn't hear understand the question.
So what do we do in the interim?
We've always had a balance of all of the counties and cities represented on the board, correct?
Right.
We don't have that this year, so I was asking, what will we do until next year? I don't think the city is represented this year.
At this point, the city is not, and we talked through that. But I think everybody felt that if you added even 2 or 3 more people, you're at half the size of the board already. And typically, I think they've rotated out positions, but it didn't fall that way this year because I believe City of Tallahassee would have been up as the vice chair, and Commissioner Richardson was actually still the immediate past chair.
So we're not talking about 2 or 3, we're talking about 1.
We talked through that in the, Commissioner Merritt and Commissioner VBC basically thought just leave it the way it was. But again, that's always subject for debate as well.
Yeah, I wasn't able to make it, but I was thinking, I told you on the phone when I called in that I thought
Right.
that the way it worked out was perfect. But, I guess this is at the city of Tallahassee's discretion of choice. But I don't think a 1-year exception of adding a City of Tallahassee person to the board of just this year, if they so see it necessary, is a bad idea. Now, if nobody from the city cares to see that happen, then that's fine too. But I would like to give them that.
I'd like to nominate Commissioner Matlow. No.
I would like, in all seriousness, I would like to do that.
Don't let them do that to you.
Mr. Attorney, would it be any problem with making just a 1-year exception?
This is a recommendation from the executive committee to the full board, so it's the will of the board.
So I would leave it, I would like to hear from the city. I mean, if you guys, I'm willing to make the motion or support a motion to have just this year, have someone from the city added on to the executive committee, which would increase the number for a
Yes,
year.
but just
one.
Right.
But I would like to hear from the city to see if that's something that they would be interested in.
Will our bylaws allow that?
We'd have to do a quick modification of the bylaws.
And also, doesn't that decision as to who represents the city has to come before the city commission?
Yes,
Okay.
it does.
But the executive committee doesn't have another meeting until when?
We don't have one scheduled at this point.
Exactly.
But I would think that in this circumstance, if you chose to do it and to add someone from City of Tallahassee, I think between the three of you could decide. I wouldn't think that would have to go back to the city for an appointment to the executive committee.
Okay.
And again,
Just to the board?
Just to this board,
Yeah.
yes, sir, since it's a subcommittee in essence of this board.
Okay.
Just for the sake of continuity, I'll volunteer to fill that role. Just for you.
The first decision to be made is even if you guys want to do
I
that.
guess we'll move forward.
The first decision to be made is even if you guys want to move in that direction. And I think that would take a board vote. Then the second decision is who actually would do it. So, Commissioner Richards, I look to you as a senior member. Do you think it to be that important for someone from the city to be represented on the executive committee of CRTPA?
I think so.
Well, yeah, I think so. But as you know, we met, maybe twice?
Yeah, last year we
Yeah.
didn't meet a whole lot, because really there wasn't a whole lot,
Right.
going through the audit until, the executive committee doesn't have a set schedule, it's
Right.
more.
Right, as needed,
as needed.
PRN, yeah.
So, Mr. Attorney, if you could put me in the right fashion here with this motion, I make a motion that we add a City of Tallahassee representative to the executive committee just for this year to increase the executive committee, the 2018, that was 1920, make an executive committee to 4 members. And this would sunset at the end of this year, or the end of the 1920 executive year.
I think that's the motion, and just need a second.
Second.
There is a motion and a second to add a city commissioner to the executive committee. Commissioner Richardson, question.
Thank you. Yeah, just a quick question. So that means we would have to amend the bylaws to reflect this action. And then when that sunsets, do we amend the bylaws again to remove that from the bylaws, or the sunset provision?
We'll draft the bylaws up so that there's no second amendment that has to be
Okay.
drafted.
Okay.
Commissioner Minor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I support the motion, but will the amendment to the bylaws need to come back to the next CRTPA
Yes,
meeting
we
for
could
approval
do it.
before it
That's
actually
one of the
comes into
things.
force?
We changed the bylaws about a year and a half ago. We actually basically would take us, I don't know if it was 60 or 90 days to amend it, but we eliminated that, so we could do this all at the next meeting and be done with it.
And I'll include that amendment of the bylaws to my motion.
Okay.
Okay. All in favor, show by the sign of vote aye.
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 Oppose? Ayes have it.
Mr. Chair.
Yes,
Mr.
Commissioner.
Director, do we also need to appoint a member from the city? Can the city come back with their appointed member?
I think technically, let's wait until you amend the bylaws and make it official, and then have a volunteer or.
Let's remember who volunteered.
I don't remember.
Thank you, sir.
I think we have Commissioner Diane William Cox. I think we have that recorded. So
Yeah,
there's no
there she
question.
is over
Yes,
there. That's Diane over there.
Okay. Executive Director, sir.
Oh, yeah, just the only other thing.
You got something else?
Yeah, we just, we passed out our budget update, as we've talked about, as part of the audit. Again, we met our 45-day timeline from the end of the quarter to get everything submitted, and we provided the updated budget sheets to you today. Unless you have any questions, Mr. Chairman, that's all I have for today.
Okay, no questions. Then the next item is CRTPA information, and that's already provided with the future meeting dates and committee actions. Citizens Multimodal Advisory Committee and Technical Advisory Committee. So those are for information purposes. Items from board members.
Mr. Chair, only thing I
Yes.
want to report, we did have a MPOAC meeting in Orlando since we last met. Meeting went well. We went over the but the legislative agenda. I think Carl's going to come give us a presentation. I think we asked for him to come give us a presentation, so I'll wait for him to give a presentation to us to give you guys the detail. We did have a very, very in-depth conversation at the end of the meeting about endorsing our giving support to Senate President Galvano's approach to transportation. What he's done is he's taken transportation and infrastructure and put it together. And so the committee that usually, and Commissioner Richardson, you're very familiar with this, the committee that's been exclusively dealing with transportation will now deal with transportation and infrastructure together, which we all thought was a good idea since they go one and the same. There was a good conversation about it. There was a couple people who objected to it, just to some of the language that was involved. But when it came down to it, everybody thought it was a good idea. So the MPOAC did send a letter of support for that change in that committee structure. Aside from that, it was all the business that was done. So Carl will come and give us a update on the legislative agenda. I think that's probably going to be scheduled for pretty soon.
Yes, for next month.
Yeah, scheduled for next month. Any questions?
Any other discussion on the mobility fee?
No, actually, it was not.
That's been dropped?
Yeah, it's been dropped.
Well, I wouldn't say it's still out there in terms of mobility fee, but it's just
mobility fee. It was more talking about alternative ways.
Right.
Because I mean, the fact of the matter is, cars are becoming more efficient.
Right.
Fuel tax revenues are going down, and we got to have a way to maintain our roads. And so, for the commissioners that weren't here, I'll probably
I was going to ask you if you could bring them up to date.
Probably 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
About 3 years ago.
About 3 years ago.
A little over 3 because it was right before I got here.
MPOAC took a vote to make as a part of the legislative agenda looking at mobility fees, which would include vehicle tracking, mileage tracking, to supplement some I think it was more looking at doing some pilot tests in certain counties around the state. That got back here to Tallahassee, and we had a lot of unhappy people that thought that we were going to be tracking their cars and tracking their vehicles and seeing where they were going, and Big Brother out there trying to tell us what to do. But that wasn't the case at all. At the end of the day, what we're trying to do, or what the MPOAC was trying to achieve, is to make sure that we're looking at innovative ways to create revenue to maintain our roads. Because again, cars are becoming so much more efficient, and then with this push now with more electric cars, I mean, there comes a day when gas tax will be obsolete. It won't be enough for us to be able to maintain our roads, but we've got to come up with a way. So the language that we put out there, if I'm correct, Greg, was to look for alternative methods of revenues for road maintenance.
And one of those, you have to be careful. People say mobility fee and things like that, and I think what happened last time was the city of Tallahassee was looking at a mobility fee that was more, in essence, an impact fee. And what you start to talk about is Commissioner Maddox is referring to is it's a vehicle miles traveled as opposed to getting charged per gallon of gas that you buy as you do now. You get charged per mile. And then it's interesting to note while we're having this conversation, I believe this year, for the first time, as part of the statewide revenue estimating conference for the DOT revenues, the group that does that actually took into account the mileage fee standards that were put in place by the Obama administration, mandating, I believe it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 miles per gallon by 2025. That's the first time that's ever been done. It had a fairly significant impact on DOT's projected revenues. So that, combined with just all the other factors are going on, you know, revenue is an issue when it comes to especially road building, and that's what concerns me when we talk about Orange Avenue. Like I said, best case today, by the time we got through design, right-of-way acquisition, it's 10 to 12 years out. And again, you know, you're talking, what, a 5 or 6 mile corridor at $15 million a month. It's $100 million plus project, and that's just, you know, that's a lot of money.
Only other thing of note was I was reappointed as chair of the MPOAC. Brian Koletka from down south is reappointed as vice chair.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Hey, I run a pretty good meeting.
Look out for us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Oh, you're welcome, Commissioner Maddox. Any other commissioners? Oh, yes. Commissioner Barfield and then William Cox.
Yes, thank you very much. Several meetings ago, I raised the issue of railroads blocking, trains blocking railroad crossings in rural areas, particularly in Jefferson County and in the Lloyd Acres area, and I believe in Gadsden County, there's a couple of instances of that. Carl McKiska, he found an article and forwarded it to me about a different state that's had this same issue, and they're putting forward some legislation before their state legislature. And if it's okay with the board, I would like for Mr. McKiska to come and let's put this on the agenda. Let's have him give us a report on that and have him explain how that process would work, and perhaps this board might want to take that up and be the leader in that throughout the state of this type of legislation. I know that our little area here is not the only one that's having an issue. So what the issue is in the Lloyd area, recently a train stopped for 12 hours, and there was only one in and one out. And a guy tried to uncouple the train, and that tumbled into the 12 hours because there's procedures to be able to put the train back together and do all of this crazy stuff. So God bless these people trying to figure it out on their own. So anyway, it is a huge issue in our rural areas. So if it's the pleasure of the board.
Commissioner Garfield, good luck with that. CSX has been so difficult to deal with. They will not.
Crawfish Island. That's now
Midway.
Midway. I mean, that's whole subdivision.
Absolutely. Well, there's yes, right in Midway. In Midway. So, if the board feels like that this is important, then working with the MPOAC, we could perhaps march forward some legislation, find a couple of House and Senate, and see what we can do with this. I don't know if we have enough time for this year, but it's a problem.
Yeah, it is. It's a
Mr. Chair, if we can just have, when Carl comes in.
It's a health and safety issue.
When Carl comes in next meeting, he can also address it.
So let's, Commissioner Barfield, I think the executive director is going to add that on the next agenda, or some agenda real soon, so we can make that arrangement and let that presentation be made.
Okay, good.
Yeah, that was what Commissioner Barfield is referring to was legislation that was introduced in Oklahoma, I believe it was.
Yeah.
Carl.
I was like, wow, that's great.
Okay, Commissioner William Cox.
I'm trying to hold on to the stall. It was on the point about revenue for roads. As we look to renewable energy, which is on our agenda tomorrow night, City Commission's agenda, these things are not, we can't look at them in tunnels. They touch. And as I'm sitting here listening, we're being charged with marching towards renewable 100% renewable energy by a date certain, and what that is going to do is translate fees from what we need to fix highways it's going to cause it to reduce even more. So we need to be already looking at having a plan to look at how we're going to deal with that in some way. I remember several years ago when folks bought vehicles outside of Florida, and they drove them, the impact fees, remember? We did a bad job because we had to give it back because we couldn't do it. We got challenged, so we've got to find a way to be able to maintain our infrastructure with less and less reliance on fossil fuels, because that's where we're heading.
Okay. Any other comment from any other commissioner?
One other thing, at the last meeting, you all suggested that us newbies go to training. So I took you up on that, and I am going to training.
Good.
So look out.
Good.
I'm going to learn something.
When you going to come back?
And I'm going to come back.
And you going to give it,
I'll be back. So that's your 1 month warning.
Oh, you're going to learn so much.
Okay, you're going to learn so much. Well,
Well, see, that's the object of actually, is to confuse you so you can't come back and ask questions. You're so confused.
So much information.
well, yeah, I mean, there are no other comments. I think
Move to adjourn.
motion to adjourn, meeting's adjourned.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I was kidding.